Today we're going to talk about AI and analytics in a box, or let's put it simply, a sovereign way of deploying SaaS solutions. Okay, how many of you are SaaS customers here? Can you just show hands? Okay, and the rest of them are like SaaS partners or partners? Okay, and SaaS people. Okay, cool, good. So we have a good mix here. Let me introduce myself. I am a global solutions product manager at HPE, and my focus area is unstructured data analytics and AI. Okay, so I work with SaaS and a lot of other ISVs, in the space of data lakehouse, analytics database, and so on. And like we are kind of creating an ecosystem where we can look at structured and unstructured data and how do you really get insights out of it. Okay. So this session is focused on looking at SaaS solutions from a sovereign standpoint. Yes, we have had all the public cloud options available, we have the on-prem options available, but then when you talk about sovereignty or when your customer asks about sovereignty, what does it really mean? Why is it important? And how do we actually approach it together with HPE and SaaS? You with me? Okay, let's get started. So, we will look at why has data and AI sovereignty become very important, almost like mission critical. What does sovereignty really mean? Okay, from different perspectives. How are the industry verticals aligned with sovereignty discussions or opportunities? Why public cloud alone cannot be the right solution for a true sovereign deployment? And then we look at HPE GreenLake. This is the platform that we have that offers a true sovereign approach to not just SaaS, but a vast majority of applications. And then we'll come to the solution itself, which is AI and analytics in a box. All right. And these boxes, by the way, are available for you to touch and feel and look at just behind this wall. So I really urge you, if you have not gone to the HPE booth, it's just behind this, and we have got, I'll show the boxes as well here. And the full spectrum of choices we offer, right, in terms of how do you deploy SaaS solutions. Okay, let's get started. So data is what fuels intelligence, and intelligence is what is defining power, especially today, right? You have got, even like LLMs were something 2 years ago, then you have the Gen AI, then you have the agentic AI now, with model context protocol endpoints being created by almost every provider, right? So this particular domain is running at a blazing speed, and data is what is fueling this AI race. However, there are a lot of concerns, okay, like regulation, AI decisioning itself, and geopolitics that is driving a lot of these decisions. So it's not just with a particular enterprise or the customer itself, but it is also a matter of where they are deploying, where they are putting their infrastructure, their data, as well as the AI models. Okay. So we have a lot of regulations in place, not just, sovereignty is not alone a topic for Europe. Yes, it started probably there, it's probably picking a lot of heat in Europe, but it is a worldwide discussion point at this point of time. Well, with AI, you have solutions that you can deploy in the public cloud as well as in a private cloud, but there are a lot of risks involved when it comes to inference. You train a model on a data set, and then that model is being used for inference. That itself can lead to risks of data exposure. And geopolitical situation, it's not just about the wars happening or whatnot, but there are like a lot of these acts that have been in place now that a lot of countries and geographies are opposing, right? And that is what is sort of driving this entire sovereign discussion. So it's not just data residency, but also the jurisdiction that handles the data and the inference coming out of it. So the risks are not just at the IT level or at the AI model level. They are pretty broad risks, and they are board level risks. Of course, it also comes down to security, national and economic security. right? We have seen instances where AI models have been used for various different questionable, activities. So how do you put, I would not call them guardrails, but more of regulations on where what is being used and for what purpose? And that is why sovereignty is not something that should be a nice to have feature, but it should be something that you define by design. When you actually are creating a solution or thinking about it, you need to think about control over your data. That's the first and foremost thing. Then the models that you're using, the inference coming out of it, the infrastructure where all of this is deployed, and lastly, the operations. So who is managing and handling this entire pipeline? So that is what is the inflection point of why sovereignty has become critical. Gartner defines sovereignty as something that you actually look at from a data residency and operational autonomy standpoint. So you have control not just over where your data resides, but who is operating it and who is handling the entire data pipeline from the data ingestion all the way to inference. And it is governed by external jurisdictions, in which country do you want to host your data and models, as well as any foreign influence that is coming in, right? How do you protect your data as well as your inference from those access points? So, sovereignty has three aspects to it: data sovereignty, operational sovereignty, and AI sovereignty. Data is basically where it's more of the residency part of it. Where is your data residing? Is it in a particular country, borders, a continent border, or is it global or hybrid, right? Then comes operational sovereignty. Do you have control over the control plane? Who manages it and how? And lastly, AI sovereignty, right? The models you use, the way you train them, and the inference you get out of them. A lot of times, customers are asked by regulators, yes, you know where your data resides, but what about your models? Where have you procured them from, right? And these questions are pertinent to not just one or two industries, but it is across the board. You look at security services, probably the most important section where sovereignty is becoming a very critical thing. Like for example, the Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, in the US, under Department of Defense, has just approved over $1 billion deal with HPE purely on sovereignty standpoints, right? And the infrastructure being used in that particular deal is what we're using for SAS Viya as well. Okay. Any other industry, right? Financial services, public sector, life sciences. I mean, Brian talked about, a drug discovery on the stage. All of these things have critical data that needs to be protected, and you need to make sure that the discoveries you're making are, in a very regulated fashion going out to people. To enable these regulations, there are a lot of acts and laws that across the globe, countries and geographies have created. You call them data protection acts or whatnot, but these are what are actually governing these regulations. And customers in each of these countries have to abide by them. And because of all of this, we are seeing that the attitude towards public cloud is slightly changing, right? Digital sovereignty is not just something that Europe is concerned with, but it is a bigger thing. There are some numbers, like 88% of the environments out there are hybrid, right? You cannot deny that gone is the time when you would say, yes, let's move to the public cloud alone and job done. That's the answer to everything. Right now, the situation is hybrid, and it will prevail to be. Half of the workloads are still running on premises. Not just analytics, but say for SAS Viya, it connects to so many data sources. Have all of them moved to the cloud? Probably not. And yes, I mean, the Gen AI and agentic AI revolution also has to cater to these disparate, distributed, fragmented data sources, right? So we have to look at this entire sovereignty story, not just from a Viya or a SAS perspective, but the entire ecosystem perspective. And the challenges with public cloud, I mean, we HPE are big time partners with the public cloud, right? We have solutions as well for AWS, Azure and Google Cloud. But there are challenges that we cannot ignore. In public cloud, you do not have control over the control plane. The management UI that you use is not owned by you, right? You don't know the location where that is running. I'm not even going to copies of data, but it's just the management console itself. When you talk about sovereignty, you have to ensure that you're talking about disconnected management or an air-gapped management. No connection to internet at all. Can public cloud of hyperscalers truly offer that? As I said, residency is not just sovereignty, it is also jurisdiction and operational ownership. And lastly, AI inference. Inference is the dominating workload in AI, it's not training. So you need to make sure that inference is what you can control with any of your AI use cases. So HPE is going with a control-first approach and not the cloud-first approach. We're not saying the cloud is not the answer. Yes, cloud is the answer for a lot of things. But first, your strategy should be control and how you can actually ensure that you have the right regulations and information in place. HPE has got GreenLake as a platform. GreenLake offers you cloud experience where your data resides. We call GreenLake the cloud that comes to you. You don't need to move data to any cloud hyperscaler. We offer cloud experience in terms of pay-per-use model, in terms of a scalability approach. You start small, you scale big for a 3 or a 5 year term. And regardless of the kind of workload you have, traditional workloads or AI workloads, we cover it all. Now, with GreenLake, there are a lot of choices. So with a public cloud or even a hybrid cloud situation, you are not entirely sure of how many copies of your data are there floating around. It is unrestricted, and sometimes these locations can be unknown. I mean, there are acts like US Cloud Act that can challenge the access and the regulations itself. But with a private cloud solution, you have choices, you have options. First is a fully private cloud solution, right? This is restricted by the customer. Then you have a sovereign cloud solution. For example, we have a lot of customers in Europe that want their entire deployment to be in the continent or in their country's borders. So we are working with a lot of service providers and cloud providers in Europe to offer that true sovereign experience. And lastly comes the air-gapped option. So you can deploy not just SaaS, but a lot of workloads in a truly disconnected fashion, have a similar management and a cloud experience on top of it. So this is the choice or the optionality that HPE GreenLake offers to customers. And for SAS Viya, we have this approach called AI and analytics in a box. We basically have tested, performance characterized, t-shirt sized, and have customers running on this solution, which basically has SAS Viya. You can use OpenShift, that's a preferred platform, but if the cost is a factor, you can go with open source Kubernetes. And we have the ProLiant servers and the Electra MP platform as a storage to kind of ensure that you have sufficient performance, both from the Intel Xeon side of things as well as the underlying all-NVMe storage. Both of these boxes are just behind the wall for you to look at. Okay. This is a high performance, a much lower TCO solution, right? We have compared this offering against the public cloud, and it is almost 30-35% cheaper when you compare it against what you get in the public cloud, including hosting and management. Yes, we have a platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, so HPE can manage this right below the SAS Viya layer for the customer. And yes, we do offer a sovereign approach, and that's what I'll talk about next. Here are the t-shirt sizes that you can go for. So if you want to just start small, we have the entry-level option, and then we go all the way from small, medium, up to large. And these sizes are defined by the concurrency on the SaaS front, how many users you have, how many jobs you have, plus the OpenShift side of things as well, right? So how many control planes do you require, how many worker nodes do you require? And all of this is running on the latest and greatest Intel chips as well as the storage technology. The storage system underneath is an all NVMe system, right? NVMe SSDs and NVMe fabric. Now, talking about operational management, right? So much like the Azure console or the AWS console, within GreenLake, you get the exact same single pane of glass management capability. So here you see, I have logged into the GreenLake console. I have access to 3 different data centers. First is a European Performance Center in Geneva. Then we have the FTC Fort Collins in Colorado. And then I have another TME HPE center in Sydney. Okay, so I mean, based on my access and the rules that I have, I can access the entire gamut of data centers and workspaces that I have access to. I can be an administrator or just a user with read-only permissions. So much like the public cloud, you can define IAM rules here with GreenLake. We have a bunch of services, and these are available in a bunch of locations. So you see on the right, you have a lot of locations that you can choose from, exactly like public cloud. And these services are ranging from managing compute infrastructure, networking, storage, and the entire manageability and observability of it, right? It's not just infrastructure alone. Sustainability is a big thing here, right? For each of our products, we have a big sustainability story. What's your carbon footprint? What's the impact on the environment, and so on. And then from a storage standpoint, here are all the services that we offer, right? So exactly like the public cloud, you get the management capability as well as the, the financial or the commercial model. You can pay for this entire offering on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, depending on, you start small with say a 2-node cluster, you can scale up to 20 nodes, not in a non-committal fashion, right? You don't need to commit to 20 on day one. It's totally up to you. So now, coming back to sovereignty, we have a full spectrum of choices in terms of operational management. So the UI that I showed you is what is called DSCC, Data Services Cloud Console. And the default option is it's running in the cloud and you have your entire infrastructure connected to it, okay? The second is a disconnected management. So you can actually run the DSCC locally on a ProLiant server and have the exact same capability for your usage. You don't need to be connected to the internet. The third approach is a read-only DSCC, which means HPE will only monitor metrics so that it can preempt issues from occurring. First of all, we do not look into the data at all. User data is totally obscured. We only look at the metrics that the systems generate, okay? And we can then analyze them to preempt failures from happening. And the last is a fully air-gapped solution, where you have a local UI for each of the boxes, storage and compute, and you can manage it exactly how you want. So there's no compulsion to connect to the DSCC in the cloud or whatever, right? So totally depends on how you want or how you define sovereignty. We have, say, a customer in France that wanted their entire infrastructure and data should be hosted in French borders, and anybody that is touching their entire system has to be a French citizen. That's how they are defining sovereignty, right? Some other customers want European citizens to be handling the data, right? So it's a very, I would say, varied term, how a customer or a country or a geo defines it, but then we have options for all these, choices. Then, coming to the management of the entire stack. So barring the SAS, Viya, and the layer above, HPE can manage everything below it. The container platform, the compute, networking, and infrastructure, all of it can be managed for the customer. We also have partners that can offer this management capability. So if the customer does not have enough IT staff to manage stuff, not a problem at all. Okay, just a couple of last slides. So this is the entire gamut of offerings that HPE has. Not just SAS, but all the kinds of data sources that SAS connects to, structured data sources, unstructured data sources, IoT services, whatever. We have our own hypervisor solution, right? The entire virtualization market is in a shift right now. So we have got a proven solution for virtualization, which is much more cost effective than the Broadcom solution. And then from a data protection standpoint, we offer partnerships with all the leading data protection companies to ensure your data, not just the Viya part of it, but the actual data sources, is efficiently backed up and is ready for disaster recovery. We don't just offer services for on-prem or a private cloud deployment. The exact same Alletra MP storage is available as a software-defined option in the public cloud. So customers that want a true hybrid deployment can actually have the same software-defined storage running in the public cloud and the same hardware running on premises. So in a nutshell, we're offering capability for you to make trustworthy AI decisions in a sovereign way. You don't need to lose control of data to kind of do innovation. You can pursue innovation with full control and knowledge of your data and models. You should look at compliance and sovereignty by design. It should not be an outcome or a nice to have tick mark feature. We are here to reduce your risk exposure. And we want to bring AI where the data lives, not for you to move data around multiple places. And lastly, we are offering one platform for different sovereignty levels and a full spectrum of choices for you to choose from. So with that, I would invite you to visit the HPE booth just behind this wall, and also come for the session tomorrow. We're talking about agentic AI and real-time analytics with SAS and HPE. That's all from my end. I'm happy to take any questions if you have.